Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, March 8th, 2024. Do I really need to say the year? Probably. A lot of these videos probably are going to, if my channel ever becomes successful, they're going to be watched years later. At least that is the hope. Let's see. They're updating the welcome gym packs, or undoing a sale on the welcome gym packs. Still really no reason why you would bother to buy gyms in this game as far as I can tell. See, Yu-Gi-Oh! Card Game 25th Anniversary Special Video Code Campaign. There's 7-letter codes hidden somewhere in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card Game's 25th Anniversary Special Video currently being shown on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Original Card Game channel. The original card game being the Japanese version, the trading card game being the Western American United States version. Find them and enter the codes in the input page for this from the button in this announcement. Those who enter the code correctly during the period will receive an accessory for each code. So there are 2 7-letter codes, which, yeah. So if I was to click the special video here, what's that going to do? It's going to launch a web page, and then on that video, let's see. So I think I've seen this video before, and I don't want to show too much of it. This is kind of a 25th anniversary highlight of Konami's new animation studio that they're promoting. So it's showing like the characters from the usual card game, but if they were in their own anime and in their own universe, instead of just being little card characters. So the general idea here would be that they're making a soft pitch for a fantasy anime series here that has some of the characters from Yu-Gi-Oh! In it, but it's not really a full pitch for anything. And it is 6 minutes that jumps around, showing off a lot of newer cards instead of just lesser cards. And it jumps around a little bit in animation style too. So yeah, it's really more of an advertisement for their animation studio or anything. And you know, it just they're really just let's see, kind of trying to get more views on the video. And yeah, what I was looking for is just in the chat here, so we can just go to the code entry page. And spoilers if you want to watch the video yourself, but in the chat somebody has just done me the favor of typing in the code. It starts YGO 25 for both, and then one is MD. So it's really just the last 2 letters. And see, that gives us Yu-Gi-Oh! Card Game The Chronicles. Protectors depicting a scene from Yu-Gi-Oh! The Card Game The Chronicles. The duelist at the venue is let out a great cheer to mark this prestigious event. Yeah. I don't think there really is going to be like a anime called Yu-Gi-Oh! The Card Game The Chronicles. Honestly, I don't know why you would call it Yu-Gi-Oh! Card Game The Chronicles. Anyways, just call it Yu-Gi-Oh! Chronicles. Wouldn't that make more sense? And in a funny way, this overemphasizes the card game over the different anime series, which were only made to promote the card game. And certainly Yu-Gi-Oh anime series don't work at all without the card game. The other code is YGO25DL. And this just is an avatar character. Kind of useless extra things, but whatever. New selection pack, Return of the King, is here. We'll look at that in a second. And then new secret pack, Songstress of the Sorrow Song, is coming. I guess technically these are coming right now. The secret pack features cards related to Tier Laments and Mermail, so Tier Laments, if that is still a big meta deck, this might be a very helpful secret pack to get Tier Lament cards. And then they've just added a couple of accessories here. And then the World Championships are being promoted, so just a lot of promotion as usual. Way too much promotion going on. So here we have Songstress Song of Sorrow, which we can get one free pull, so let's get that first. We probably don't have enough gems to go too deep into buying things, so if this gives me one key, which it almost certainly will, towards something else, we now just have a card pack back to that same secret pack. We can open this, and so we should just look at the featured cards and see where we are. Well, weirdly, this is a terrible, terrible secret pack to go for. Even if you just were trying to get ultra rares, I have so many of these cards already. And that, I guess, highlights a problem. This is a brand new secret pack, and yet it is really just rebundling cards that you could have gotten in other packs. Yeah, that does not work. Here we have a Tier Laments Protector. We'll purchase that. Not that we'll ever use it. And we have new wall art background. We'll purchase that. We probably will use that at some point. And then the only other thing we have here to look at would be this Return of the King. And let's just see how many cards we have in this. Well, it's a decent card pack to spend gems on. But if I end up opening like 30 packs, which is a possibility, although I guess not guaranteed. Like, the only reason I'd ever open 30 packs would be if I was really just trying to get all the cards, because 30 packs is actually wrong. 30 packs feels about right as far as the number of times you would need to open any pack to get a decent percentage of the cards that are available. But if you do 30, then there is always going to be this chance that you would end up doing 40, which I guess that's the gamble I'm taking. Inherently, when you have these new packs, though, they're showing me a bunch of cards that I've never seen before, and it's too many cards to get super excited about it. That is one thing that's interesting about the game I'm playing now, Hand of Fate 2. In it, every single card is a very unique event card. So there aren't that many of them. It is much more of a deck builder game than a trading card game. But yeah, when you see a new card, you want to figure out what it does pretty certainly. You kind of have to figure out what it does, or you're going to never get good at the game. where it just is incredibly overwhelming to try and do that in something like Yu-Gi-Oh, which has 10,000 cards that you could potentially look at. Even if I was just reading the effects of all the ultra rares and super rares, which would be doable, that still would take a lot of time. But, you know, I probably should make that the new standard when we flip through all of these cards, because all I'm doing when I'm flipping through these cards is just looking at the art. And the art is so inconsistent in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just all over the place with different artists and different themes that nothing ever really grabs my attention. It is interesting, certainly, that it's iconic that you have like Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl still being the main characters people think of, or Blue Eyes White Dragon being the main characters you think of in Yu-Gi-Oh! But those characters have just not evolved in any way at all, and they haven't led to any other characters of real interest. In some of the sequel anime series, you have characters that are new animation takes on a Dark Magician-like character, but those are nowhere as interesting or popular. Let's see. Really don't have enough gems to open up any of these other packs. So we're in an interesting position here, in that the biggest news by far, overshadowing the United States State of the Union by most people on the internet, I would say that are more interested in things on the internet than US politics, would be that Akira Toriyama, I believe, the creator of Dragon Ball, has passed away at age 68, which for a Japanese male, that's perhaps a little young. And certainly that's going to affect things. There's a massive amount of Dragon Ball games and video games based on Dragon Ball. There is the game Sandland, which was Akira Toriyama's next big project that has been announced and is coming out. But I imagine all of those games are made by the likes of Capcom or Konami, by other people. So Akira Toriyama may very well have very little oversight or input on any of that, and so him passing probably isn't going to change anything in the short run. In the long run, we may see some slight shift in direction with like the latest Dragon Ball animes and games. You may see Sandland, if it gets a sequel, having stories and events feeling slightly different. But it is very much, for video games specifically, going to be a long run thing. I can say, as a former anime fan, Dragon Ball, and Dragon Ball in particular, not Dragon Ball Z, was a thing of the past for decades now. That kind of more kid-friendly cartoon just doesn't really play as well, and if it does play as well, it is much more extreme, and it has evolved from what Dragon Ball originally was. And even in that, Dragon Ball Z is much more extreme than Dragon Ball was, and it evolved into much more of a fighting episode, a fighting series versus in tournament series versus what Dragon Ball originally was, which was more of a fantasy series with a little bit of fighting. So, yeah. the anime style for Dragon Ball and the anime style for Dragon Ball Z are both fairly old. That Dragon Ball Z, never really going into like the kawaii, the moe, the chibi art style. It really just could not shift that drastically in the animation style and satisfy that fan base. And so, while there may have been a lot of clones of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z originally, they all failed fairly miserably, and then the rest of the anime community went in different directions, not even daring to try and copy Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z. The closest things you have comparisons to something like Dragon Ball Z would be things that were really close to the same air times, like Yu Yu Hakusho, or One Punch Man kinda is doing that, but that's more of a comedy. When you think of things like Demon Slayer, they go in different directions to really stand out and not be compared to what has just been such an extremely long-running and extremely popular series. Almost certainly 20-30 years down the line, there still will be fans of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. There probably will be remakes and re-releases of Dragon Ball Z. There probably will be continuations of the series and sequel series. Let's see. Are we ready to do that, or are we gonna wait? Let's wait. But yeah, I don't think that there's that great of a impact just because, to video games in particular, just because of the fact that Dragon Ball was so early that what a video game would have been when Dragon Ball came out, and even Dragon Ball Z, would have been closer to an NES or Super NES game, and it just really wouldn't have had the level of graphics and the level of complexity to adapt well, adapt the source material well from Dragon Ball Z. And ironically, some of the most recent Dragon Ball sequel series have had such low budgets to them that the animation style in most recent ones have been questioned, and the animation style of the original Dragon Ball series was probably a little bit bare bones too. Now, I think if you really pressed a true Dragon Ball fan, or Dragon Ball Z fan, really, it's mostly going to be Dragon Ball Z fans, they really only like Goku, they really only like up to a certain point. I think the recommendation is just to skip everything after the Cell Saga, or even skip the Cell Saga in Dragon Ball Z. There has not really been any major interest in the sequel series that has stayed around that much. At most, what has gotten some excitement, I think, is probably like the movies. That seems to be where you're going to get the best quality, is if you're just watching the Broly movies, because then you have 2 hours of an action-packed fight instead of a long-running TV series that's going to stretch it out for far too long. So yeah, I'd have to ask a more up-to-date anime fan what the recommendation is, but I think it is something along the lines of skip all of Dragon Ball, start with Dragon Ball Z, watch Dragon Ball Z until either the Majin Buu saga or the Cell saga, and then watch the movies would be my guess as to the recommendation there. And yeah, it really is. Broly seems to be somewhat popular, and Goku seems to be really popular, but a lot of the kids are less popular. Now I'm gonna have to double check this, but I was watching DF Retro cover this Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons remake. Everybody that I've seen cover this game says that it still is not performing well enough for what it should be doing. And they mentioned in DF Retro, I think, that Rhianna Pratchett worked on the game. She is the daughter of Terry Pratchett, who is the author of many, if not all, the Discworld books. I think probably all of the Discworld books, but maybe they've got a ghostwriter writing them now. So she is the daughter of a big deal British fantasy author, and I follow her on Twitter, and I have not seen her promote this Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons at all. So maybe it's just the same name and a different person, or maybe there's something deeper in that she's not really involved with the remake and has no interest in promoting the remake. Now, one of the things I can say personally that I had a problem with Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is that the story kind of just takes a curve, and it doesn't really foreshadow that curve. At least that was my experience. And I've had that happen to me in a few games, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe I'm just a little too ADD and I'm not paying attention to the stories sometimes in video games. I don't think I'm that bad. I get the story for most games, but particularly in Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, they are on a quest to save their mother, and then just in the middle of that quest, and this is just a slight spoiler, something horrible happens to one of the two brothers, and it's just not foreshadowed at all. Yeah, you just don't expect it to happen at all. And it just didn't feel like it was good writing, particularly for video games, to have something out of control, horrible, happen to you. Or to one of the characters, one of the two characters you were controlling. That while I'm playing Hand of Fate 2, that is something that I'm also finding interesting, is that there is a real danger of Hand of Fate 2 turning into more like a Dungeons and Dragons type game where it's an open narrative and the players can just say what's going to happen, and it's up to the dungeon master to roll with the narrative or keep them in line, keep them on rails at least a little bit. Hand of Fate as a video game really can't do that. So very specifically in one mission, you're not given the choice at all. You're going to work for the Empire and you're going to kill a bunch of peasants who are infected with a plague. You're just told you're going to do that. You're put into a fight sequence. You have to win the fight sequence, or it's game over. In the next mission, it's the exact opposite. Now you're trying to save the peasants infected with the plague, and in a different mission, in a different city. And yeah, that is an intriguing way to solve what almost certainly would have come up in game testing, as far as there's a real moral decision there. But that is also kind of how Hand of Fate plays more naturally too, is that you're told an event is going to happen, you're told you're going to do something, and you're going to have to defend these people. On a few rare occasions you get to decide what side you're on, but on most occasions not, so you just have to go with the way the story wants you to go. So, I'm going to make a bold statement today that Nintendo has made the video games console fight that is mostly just Nintendo, their anti-emulation fight, they have made it much worse on themselves, and they are losing the fight, even though they have shut down the Yuzu and Citra emulators and gotten Yuzu to agree, on paper at least, to pay them $2.4 million. Now, why am I saying Nintendo lost when there's so much legal wrangling showing that they had won? Well, the answer is very simple. What we know, what any gamer who pays enough attention to mainstream video game journalism, which I don't inherently recommend doing that, but for the people that do, what we know is that mainstream video game journalism has been very much in the pocket of games, and they were under direct threat from people like Nintendo specifically, to never mention emulation, or they would never get free games and early access to games to review it. So we have never really seen mainstream video game journalists come out and talk about emulation in a highly public way. You might have the occasional person mention it here and there, maybe hidden behind a paywall, maybe on a Patreon stream, but it definitely is just not the thing that you would really should be hearing more about, considering how popular emulation has become, thanks to the likes of Steam Deck most recently, but RetroPies in previous situations, and just a myriad of other devices now that are cheap enough and good enough to play old games, particularly now that it is also easy enough and relatively safe enough to find ROMs through a VPN and things like that, torrents through a VPN. But yeah, we have Video Games Chronicle doing the podcast here. When does emulation become acceptable? ? And when you have mainstream video game journalists having a whole podcast title mentioning emulation and arguing when it becomes acceptable, that's Nintendo losing the fight against emulation, because they have lost the hearts and minds of people who were literally under the threat of not getting early access games, people who needed in the past to get early access games to review games, although that concept I think has pretty much died away these days, and most mainstream video game journalists aren't really suffering that much if they don't review a game on day one launch. And I can probably just answer the question as far as when does emulation become acceptable. It's probably going to be a personal opinion on a lot of people, but it's going to be, for most people who are willing to do emulation ever, when a game is not reasonably available for purchase. Now, I put a lot of wiggle room in the phrase reasonably there, but yeah. If you can buy an old copy of Super Mario Brothers and an old NES, but it's going to cost you $700, that's not reasonable in most people's books, when you could just get any emulation software or device for way less and a ROM of Super Mario Brothers. When you can buy something on Steam that runs perfectly fine and it's only 69 cents, at that point it's probably not worth your effort to even bother to try and download something for a ROM versus just owning it outright on Steam. So yeah, that is a wide gap between 69 cents and $700 too. And the crossover line is probably about $60. Maybe less, depending on how much you value the old games. Inherently, the vast majority of ROMs are not valuable I think, in people's minds. We could certainly talk public, when should video games have gone in the public domain, or when should they go in public domain, considering how this new type of media and this new type of market property should have been thought about and should have been treated. And arguably 10 years probably should have been the limitation of copyright on video games. I'm fairly certain, I might be wrong about this, that there was a point, maybe not originally, but in the early days of copyright, where a book had to stay in print for you to maintain your copyright. And certainly that there have been laws that say you have to constantly prove and defend that your copyright is still valid, or you have to prove and defend that your trademark is still valid to maintain it. But yeah, once a game effectively is abandonware, whatever that term means to you, what that means to me is that the game has been abandoned by the company for any amount of time, at which point you cannot purchase it. I think most people who are willing to emulate would say that would be okay. Now, I've said that phrase, most people are willing to emulate, because there is a type of people out there who just drink the Kool-Aid as far as capitalism goes, and that they, for either religious or just other reasons, will say that digital copying something that you can have infinite copies of is the equivalent of, say, stealing milk from a baby's bottle, where you're depriving a baby of sustenance. And so when you look at it from that, and when you're just coming from the thou shall not steal perspective, then you'll never be willing to emulate anything other than open source things that were never copyrighted in the first place. But those people also are the type of people that just kind of hate video games and hate fun anyways, and so that they were never going to emulate in the first place. And that isn't a significant enough audience to really listen to it. But yeah, there are definitely some arguments to be made about when a company makes something digital and can make infinite copies, are they really at that point making a product, or are they selling just what would be the equivalent of an NFT? And there might be something to be said about products need to cost a company something when they make it, in either materials cost, so that it isn't just 100% profit. They need to be paying an employee for every single copy of a video game being sold, or they need to be paying a licensing fee, which they may be doing something like that, but it is just a weirder way to think of products and services when you can just make infinite copies, and you're not taking any limited resource out of the earth. You're not taking metals or oil out of the earth or anything like that. And you're not paying an employee effectively, which some of that means you're not putting the money back into society in enough of a way. At least that argument could be made. Yes, you may be paying taxes on the millionth copy of a video game that sells, but you're probably not paying any associate level employee at all. You're probably not doing much of anything. You may be paying rent in some factory somewhere. Like you may be paying a CEO's salary somewhere. And that is, at that point, well, not something that you might argue is immoral. It is definitely imbalance. That is an imbalance that is only created because the copyright laws are protecting other people from making copies of that same digital asset. And so, in an effort to try and create more of a balance, more equity, and I'm going to use the word equity even though normally I don't make equity arguments, copyright probably should go away. Like, it definitely would be a different world, for instance, if, say, as soon as digital versions of the King James Bible were available, then the digital versions of the King James Version of the Bible were not copyrightable, and as such, anyone could have a free copy of that who would want it. At that point, that would almost certainly benefit society more, as far as comparing who should benefit there. That's not forcing anybody to inherently print King James versions of the Bible and give them away for free. The Gideons do that anyways, but yeah. The copyright, the digital part, the right to make a copy of it, for like the King James Version of the Bible should have expired a long time ago. And instead, there have been little tricks done to, I'm pretty sure, keep it out of the public domain. And so far more harm has probably been done to society because of the copyright around something like an old book like the King James Version of the Bible, than good has been done around that. Ironically, copyrighting the Bible itself is almost certainly something that is forbidden if you interpret the Bible or Jesus' teachings the right way. But yeah, we are in a terrible, terrible capitalistic system. Most people around the world are, and copyright, it has been written by rich people who want to get richer, and not by politicians who should really consider the balance of harms versus good as far as the copyright system goes. Yes, we don't want no copyright so that the original creators of games for the first year or two can't make profit, but even in video games terms, they really only seem to care about the first year or two of sales. That's all they really report on, that's all they really celebrate. So you could arguably make the claim that they should lose copyright protection after 3, 4, 5 years as far as video games go. And we probably should just go ahead and make a law that says if there is a new form of entertainment like virtual reality, there probably should be smaller copyright protection for new technologies. And see, that's not even talking about like derivative works, which arguably the King James Version of the Bible is a derivative work of just older versions of the Bible, so probably each shouldn't be copyrighted on that terms. If older versions of the Bible are public domain, then everything derived from the public domain source should probably be public domain. And we're seeing an example of this. I'm going on a copyright rant here. But we're seeing it with like Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie in the public domain. We haven't seen the world stop. We haven't seen Disney go bankrupt from that. Disney may be going bankrupt for other reasons, but it's not because of Steamboat Willie. The other thing to probably mention about emulation is there are definitely some games that just don't play right. Like Tomb Raider, the original Tomb Raiders, they just don't play right. So if the available version has been so drastically changed, or it just doesn't correctly run, I think you still have a valid argument for emulation there too. Also, I'm just gonna end this here. I'm not sure if I can win. Let's see. Lego, this isn't Lego video games from TT Games, but just Lego themselves, has announced that they are going to have a series of Batman the Animated Series sets, which in Lego form probably won't look that different from the other Lego Batman sets that have already existed. They're showing what is kind of like the intro sequence to Batman the Animated Series in more of a 2D vignette. And so I guess that's what this is going to be, is that they're going to release a like picture frame 2D vignette of Batman the Animated Series with a lot of flat 2D little Easter eggs. But see, like the Batman, the Catwoman, all of those figurines just look like pre-existing Batman, Catwoman figurines. Feels like that is going to be massive and way too expensive. See if we can figure out how many pieces that says. Meanwhile, I'm losing over here. So this is an 18 plus build. And I can't fully see the numbers if we show it here with my magnifying on, but I believe that's 4,200 pieces if I was to guess. 18 plus build. But yeah, that is a massive piece and kind of hard to justify because I'm not sure that's really what I would want. I guess inherently, if I had Batman the Animated Series on Blu-ray, I'm not sure they even have a Blu-ray version. It probably needs to be remastered to like 4K UHD. It probably would look really good because I think they shot it on black paper on film. So it was a black background paper which gave it its signature darkness, or more dark than usual. And I think they shot it on film, each frame on film, so if they rescanned the films and did a good job on it, 4K UHD set might come out. But even at that, you run into the problem that buying the entire animated series on 4K UHD is probably going to be somewhere around $90, and then this Batman set is going to be somewhere around $380. It's just so incredibly expensive and so incredibly big that you really would have to be way more nostalgic around Batman the Animated Series than I think most people would be. Even in that, they're showing you're going to have to use and have custom special furniture to display it. So suffice it to say, Lego has gotten incredibly expensive and fairly off the rails as far as doing things here and there. Speaking of off the rails, EU says it is investigating why Apple terminated Epic's developer account. The move blocks Fortnite maker from releasing the game and its own online store on iOS. I imagine Apple will have some excuse as to why they blocked the developer account. But this may very well just be the beginning of yet another court battle that, as long as Apple can just drag it out forever, Apple will win against Epic. Meanwhile, every second that Fortnite is not easily playable and installable on iPhones and iPads is another second that a kid will decide to play some other game instead of Fortnite. Apple has done this kind of business before, where they've done something fairly obviously wrong and then just fought it in courts and then eventually just given up and agreed to stop doing something or agree to pay some small pittance. Which, yeah, maybe the European courts will put some real injunctions in place and force Apple to move way faster, or force Apple to pay a huge fine for every day that the developer account is not allowed. May also be just a case of Epic whining about something that doesn't perhaps matter as much as it would seem like it would. Maybe you just don't really need a developer account to make a game and publish a game on your own app store. Maybe that is something that is really only necessary for the likes of publishing a game directly through iOS and the Apple App Store. It's unfortunately more early days than we'd like. Yeah. And so we probably are just not going to get a follow-up on this story in any reasonable amount of time. And even if we do get a follow-up on the story and this whole situation gets resolved, at the end of the day it's just going to be Fortnite on iOS. Guess we'll pick this one. How many cards do we have in here? Just one. Okay. We're letting him draw a massive amount of cards here. But we're going for a one-turn kill. Also, we'll see if we can pull that off. This is the right card. No, it isn't. Whoops. I don't think I mentioned it, but I finally uninstalled the adult game Seven Mortal Sins Ecstasy on my cell phone. I was just not playing it. I still am playing the Star Trek Lower Decks game, and they are keeping it update fairly well enough now, I would say. So I haven't run into major gaps of time. The Star Trek Lower Decks game in particular has way too much reliance on trying to get ad revenue out of people and microtransactions out of people, for as terrible as the game actually is. I'm still playing the adult game Tinkafuma, which is keeping things updated well enough to keep that interesting. And I'm still playing Memento Mori on 2 different accounts, which is probably too much, and I have noticed that I've slowed down a little bit on just staying up with the story expansions per character. So I have 2 or 3 characters I need to listen to what their individual stories are, whereas most people are complaining about the overall story not progressing that much on Memento Mori. At least on their Reddit subreddit, that's what people are kind of complaining about. But yeah, I'm still making enough progress, and they added quite a few features in Memento Mori to make it a deeper game, considering it's a game that is fully automated and just as an auto battler. But yeah, unfortunately, if I was going to play a lot of mobile games, there still is just not a high level of quality or a high level of amount of games out on mobile. Let's continue with the news. Capcom has released the Dragon's Dogma character creator tool. Players can create characters now and transfer them into the main game when it launches. That's an interesting thing. I think we are at the point though where character creating tools should be sort of universal. I could certainly see it being a case where you make something that is a modern equivalent to a Nintendo Mii, and then all Unreal Engine games can use that and can convert it over, or all Unity games can use it and convert it over, since they would all be in the same engine and the same file format, or at least all games that approve that. It is a little surprising that there isn't a mod out there for just like every game to put in your own custom character design. I guess there's probably some limitations there that would have to be addressed, as far as one Unreal Engine licensing certain fabrics and certain textures, and then the next Unreal Engine game not licensing that. So if something like the Unreal Engine was going to have a universal character creator that you make once and use in multiple games, which in itself might be very, very boring, you would kind of have to have loose API standards, as far as your character is going to wear gloves that are black, but the black gloves may look different in one game versus the other. But yeah, we probably should have one universal character creator amongst several different game engines. Steam could do that, certainly. Nintendo did do that with the Miis, although their Miis didn't have enough detail in them, and they were pretty well abandoned. Microsoft could do that, Sony could do that. It really shouldn't be a headline when a company has a character creator tool or releases a character creator tool early. So here's Yuji Horii, the Dragon Quest creator, commenting on Akira Toriyama's death. Let's see. I am still in overwhelming disbelief at the news of Toriyama's sudden death. I have known Toriyama since I was a writer at Shonen Jump. When I started working on Dragon Quest, I asked him to do artwork for the game at the recommendation of Shonen Jump publisher and editor Kazuhiko Torishima. In the 37 years since, Toriyama has designed characters, monsters, and created countless more charming characters for Dragon Quest. The history of Dragon Quest goes hand in hand with Toriyama's character designs. Toriyama and the late Dragon Quest composer Koichi Sugiyama were companions who worked on Dragon Quest with me for a long time. To think they would die, ... I don't know what more to say. This is truly, truly unfortunate. Obviously, this would be translated from Japanese. And yeah. is more of a subtle language, Japanese taking less characters. But that's almost certainly as close to a direct translation as we'd ever see. So let's just go ahead and summon this and see what we can do. Probably gonna lose here. I tried for a one-turn kill, and my ambition is almost certainly going to lead to some struggle. There was a fairly heavy amount of push recently to make Dragon Quest games, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see Dragon Quest games starting to get cancelled, or the character design changing a little bit because of Akira Toriyama dying. So yeah, but Dragon Quest also has kind of failed to make any inroads in the West. So, and a lot of those Dragon Quest games that were announced recently definitely felt like they were mobile spin-offs, that they weren't really trying that hard with them. Now, Dragon Quest, the mainline series, is extremely popular in Japan, to the point where a lot of businesses just give the day off because they know people are going to call in sick on that day. And for a Japanese person to call in sick and not go to work, that is saying something in particular. And that may be more myth than reality, as far as the story I've heard about that. And you would want to see that the mainline Dragon Quest games that come over to the West, but they're kind of hard sells, that they are still a little bit too much of a traditional Japanese RPG. They look kid friendly, but then there's, I think, a little bit too much grinding in it for what a Western audience is really looking for. The Steam Deck Twitter page has highlighted some new games that have been verified on Steam, retweeting things: Trinity Fusion and RZE, the Jewel of Faramore. And let's see, Aloth, Champions of the Four Kingdoms. Yeah, and then before that it was GSE Dice Folk. That was February 26th, and this one is February 24th. So, yeah. Steam Deck continuing to, I guess, highlight its compatibility and increased compatibility with new games, which is something you just can't see for any other portable emulation device that's just running Linux or a different form of Linux, or running Android and a bunch of emulators. The Steam sale, I believe, is on right now. Unfortunately, I think I've blown my budget as far as buying a Steam Deck OLED. So, I will see if I can somehow squeeze the pennies together, but the price on the Steam Deck OLED is really, really high. Even if it's on sale, it's probably going to be really, really high. The BAFTA Game Awards nominations are out now, with Baldur's Gate 3 dominating, which for 2024 nominations, I imagine these will be games that actually came out in 2023. And 2023, from what I haven't just completely eliminated from my mind, was such a poor performing year for video games that, I mean, I don't know what else you'd even begin to argue as far as nominations should be included. Maybe there's an argument that Phantom Liberty DLC for Cyberpunk should be considered. Let's see. Baldur's Gate 3, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2 lead. Marvel Spider-Man 2 has been honored with 9 nominations. Alan Wake has 8 nominations. Other notables include Tears of the Kingdom with 6 nominations, Star Wars Jedi Survivor 6 nominations, Dave the Diver with 5, Hi-Fi Rush, Cocoon, Dredge, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Viewfinder, and Final Fantasy 16. Which, I'm not sure if the nominations themselves aren't just voted on by random people, or if it's all from the British Academy of Fine Theatre Arts that vote on the nominations, then vote on the winners. Several indie games are mentioned here also, although I feel like some of these games, like Goodbye Volcano High, I don't think they really came out in 2023, so maybe there is no actual year limitation on it. And then the BAFTA is happening April 11th of 2024. Seems like it's fairly late, but I have made the argument that the Video Game Awards probably should happen later in the first quarter of the year too. It wouldn't be a terrible thought to just have all your Game of the Year awards happen a month after the end of the year, so it's not so close to the Christmas sales season and so close to a period where you just don't feel that need to promote or announce new games. You'd almost certainly, if BAFTA was streamed and run like the Game Awards, you'd almost certainly have a lot more announcements for games. All the like Xbox Partner Directs, Sony Partner Directs, Xbox Directs, Sony Directs, Nintendo Directs, everything we've seen between now and January 1st could have been at the BAFTA Awards if they wanted to be more about showing announcements for new games. And it would feel more separated anyways at that point, because things like Baldur's Gate 3 have already gotten their Christmas sales. They're not going to lose sales if they announced some new game in April, even in March, even in February. Moving on, EA's CEO says 60% of development processes could be impacted by generative AI. EA's boss Andrew Wilson said generative AI is something the publisher is embracing deeply. Undoubtedly, EA is pretty much the obvious company that would just unabashedly embrace generative AI, because they just don't care about the quality of their games at all. It's pretty obvious, and they just happen to have the licenses and the money to afford the licenses for a lot of sports games and a lot of other games that maybe EA originally made those games and they own the IP for. Maybe EA just acquired those companies. Even at that, if I was to look at a list of EA games, I'm not sure there's that many that I really would care about. That seems to be the case most of the time when I look at video game companies, is that there's often long lists of games that these longer, older companies have made, but most of the games on the list are not interesting. You couldn't really make a remake or a remaster around them. Let's see. Yeah, here we have Video Games Chronicle talking about performance, where Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons remake drops as low as 454p on the Xbox Series S, according to an analyst, Digital Foundry. Yeah, that is particularly poor. Like, I won't say all dynamic resolution is evil, but when you have something that is a 1080p game, or something that should run very easily as a 1080p game, dropping at any point to below what would be like the 512 lines interlaced of a original TV from 60 years ago. That's ridiculous. For the most part, most computer gamers would have had video cards that did at least 640 by 480, and that would have been a progressive signal too. And that's even lower than that. So yeah, you have to ask yourself, what's the point of remastering everything and just improving the graphics, unless this is the way a company is teaching its new employees or training its employees on a new technology, is just to remake an old game, which that would make some logical sense. That's something Microsoft certainly could do. They could take the long list of Activision Blizzard games now and just have new employees make remakes on a new engine, or have employees test out a new engine while making a remake that could be sold, on the job training type concepts. But if that was the only reason you were going to do it, then you shouldn't have put the game out in such a poor state. You should have just said, forget it. Well, we trained the people and then we moved on. But yeah, I don't even 100% know if the original game ran that well. It is very much a uncared for game, considering that they're bothering to make a remake around it. Let's see. Here we have a GameDeveloper.com article saying Alchemy Labs CEO Andrew Ichi thinks devs should be bullish about AI, which increasingly we're going to see this spoken out loud and proud, as far as just CEOs trying to promote and make AI sound like something that will be a good thing. And one of two things I imagine will happen. Either AI will become a thing and it will just become the new standard of perhaps making cheaper and lower quality art, or it'll just be replaced by the next big keyword that CEOs hear about, and then you'll hear the CEOs talking about that, in the same way that CEOs this time last year were all talking about NFTs, and now nobody is talking about NFTs. Arguably, I think somebody should probably hold CEOs' feet to the fire as far as just bandwagoning and jumping on trends to boost up their stock share prices. The Silent Hill 2 remake has been, I believe, rated in Korea. Let's see. I think that's what happened there. Yeah. Here's the page. And see if my translation app can do anything here. There we go. Let's see. Silent Hill 2. Youth use is not permitted, or adventure game about meeting a woman who resembles his dead wife in a village of memories. Excessive violence. There's excessive fresh blood from hitting and being hit. There's an expression of physical damage, such as creatures being separated. Such as the creature being separated. I feel like that means cut in half. Excessive expression of disgust and fear. There's expression of disgust such as creature with bizarre limbs, and expression of fear such as gloomy backgrounds and bizarre sounds. Therefore, in accordance with Article 21 of the Game Industry Promotion Act and Article 7, Paragraph 4 of the Ratings Regulation, the game was classified as not for use by youth. Now, interesting here, as far as the icons, these are pictures, so I can't translate that. But I would assume this means dialogue. I would assume this means violence or fear or running. This might be sexually suggestive dialogue, although if it is, then this symbol looks like, yeah, I guess maybe that's what it is implying. I have no idea what like lightning means, and I assume this might be drug use, and this might be just crime, and I don't know what the money symbol here is supposed to be. So yeah, I need a crane person probably to figure out just what these symbols mean. I would assume that this is probably the way Koreans depict a number 1 or letter A, and that this would be number 2, and so at being in orange, that is more extreme as far as the amount. But yeah, maybe there's some gambling in it. This looks to me like handcuffs, so I'd assume crime. Otherwise it might be like a scale for weighing drugs. This almost certainly is drugs though. Then this might just be harsh language, and this might be just violence, and this might be fear, and then yeah, I assume this is sexually suggestive dialogue. Which those are all things that we would assume were going to be in Silent Hill 2 remake, because they were the things that would have been in Silent Hill 1. Here is the official announcement being reposted from Dragon Ball Official. Dear friends and partners, we're deeply saddened to inform you that the manga creator Akira Toriyama passed away on March 1st due to an acute subdural hematoma. He was at the age of 68, so it took him 7 days to announce it publicly, which is more than fine. It is our deep regret that he still had several works in the middle of creation with great enthusiasm. Also, he would have many more things to achieve. However, he has left many manga titles and works of art in this world. Thanks to the support of many people around the world, he has been able to continue his creative activities for over 45 years. We hope that Akira Toriyama's unique world of creation continues to be loved by everyone for a long time to come. We inform you this sad news with gratefulness for your kindness during his lifetime. Funeral services was held with his family and very few relatives following his wishes for tranquility. We respectfully inform you that we would not accept flowers, condolence gifts, visitings, offerings, or others. Also, we ask you to refrain from conducting interviews with his family. Future plans for commemorate gathering is not decided. We will let you know when it's confirmed. We deeply thank you for your understanding and support, as always. Of course, this is, once again, being translated from Japanese. And this is Bird Studio Capsule Corporation, Tokyo. So, yeah. He has left, they're pointing out, a lot of anime and manga unfinished, which I'm sure somebody else will come in and finish it. And honestly, there's probably quite a few mangaka out there and just anime creators, manga creators, that either will draw out their content and their decorations right up until the point they die and never finish it, or will draw it out to the point where it becomes so bad that it gets canceled. Particularly around Shonen Jump, if something gets bad, it won't be voted on, and they won't continue funding and developing the issues. In Shonen Jump, the readers, in the original Shonen Jump, maybe not Shonen Jump Weekly, it may not be the same, but the readers voted on what issues they wanted more of every week. And so if the readers didn't like what you were doing, they would just get canceled. Although inherently that also led to things like Dragon Ball Z, as far as you would just always have everything power up and power creep higher, and you would always end on a cliffhanger in the hopes of getting another issue funded, which just caused a lot of series to stretch out. And I've been watching, for instance, Bleach: A Thousand Year Blood War as far as the manga official way to end the Bleach series instead of the way it was originally ended. And you can definitely feel it in the Bleach anime, where they've kind of played out the gimmick of having a new, even more powerful enemy every episode far too much. And because they stretched it out so much, the anime is now trying to squish it back into a more reasonable length of an anime series. And you're really fighting 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 characters in one episode, and it just has no impact at all. I imagine Bleach: A Thousand Years Blood War is actually rather good in the manga format, but the animated format rushes everything along in too much. But it kind of has to, because it is effectively just a enemy of the week series. Yep. I think it probably would be respectful as far as Akira Toriyama's works to try and wrap it up quickly, in particular since any animator, any mangaka that works on it is just not going to have ownership of those creations. So it would just make sense to wrap it up. How are they going to wrap up Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z? They probably won't, but they probably will wrap up the most recent ones that Akira Toriyama worked on and move on to a whole new series that is just kind of a reboot series, I imagine. But yeah, this very possibly will affect Dragon Quest games, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball games, and Sandland. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else as far as games that he's worked on. Moving on, Warner is trying to set expectations, I guess that's Time Warner, for the Hogwarts Legacy free summer update. Additional updates and features will be a small way of us showing appreciation to their players, which seems kind of crazy, considering how all the other Time Warner games right now are not doing very good. With Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League not doing very good, and yeah, them not really having anything else. You would think that you would do something to keep people playing Hogwarts Legacy to try and fill in a gap before you can make something else. They are in this weird position where they want to remake the Harry Potter series movies, and so they probably want a whole new bunch of Harry Potter games to line up with new Harry Potter characters or actors. But yeah, I'd say Time Warner really doesn't have anything else to lean on, so they probably should be leaning on Hogwarts Legacy and then trying to announce something more. Maybe the right move is to rush to a Hogwarts Legacy 2, and maybe by having small updates they can do that. But yeah, I don't think that's the right move either. I think they probably should consider Hogwarts Legacy Warner's equivalent to like a GTA 5, something that will just sell for a long time as long as they continue to support it. And maybe that just means they need some microtransactions and an online casino like GTA Online to keep people interested, or maybe they need to pivot Hogwarts Legacy to be an MMO, which that probably would work fairly well. I wouldn't be surprised though if Time Warner just doesn't do anything. Yep. I'm not certain which of the more recent Dragon Ball shows this is supposed to be, but yeah. And I think Dragon Ball, I know the original Dragon Ball was not animated this well, and you'd really never have a character this close to the camera. But yeah, and you know Goku is grown up in Dragon Ball Z, so if this is supposed to be a new animation of Goku, then again, I have no idea what this is from. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com has this corporate kryptonite ? Developers and insiders discuss the power of game industry unions. If you want to check out this article. Yep. I do think we will see video game unions happen more and more in the United States. It may be too little too late, and frankly, I think many other industries needed to unionize before they got too small and too broken up in the United States, and they didn't. So yeah, I think most people would argue that if every single industry in the United States became unionized tomorrow, if it just magically flipped a switch and that would happen, I don't think that solves bigger problems of automation and removes a need probably for something like UBI to be implemented. I think UBI is really the only thing that could help bump up the United States economy in a big way to overcome automation and other problems that have happened, and other ways corporations have been able to strip the associate level employees of having any chance of having a livelihood. There's some other things we could do with the US economy, like taxing rich, which that never goes over, a lot more, having more socialized medicine programs, actual socialized medicine programs available to everybody, true universal health care, and eliminating foreign ownership in land and real estate would almost certainly be a great idea too. That would solve major housing issues. But yeah, as far as video games getting into unions, that'll be good for that industry, and that industry almost exclusively. Microsoft says that a Russian state-backed hackers have accessed its source code and internal systems. The threat actor Midnight Blizzard has been targeting Microsoft since late 2023. The funny thing here is, if Microsoft source code has been compromised, maybe that would just give Microsoft a great opportunity to look over some of its source code and write new code, better code. In particular, this got me thinking that if I was in charge of Microsoft, I would probably want to call up some people that work at NASA and look at the way they write code and the way the style guides and the rules that are fairly extreme as far as coding at NASA seems to be. That way a new Windows or an update to Windows is not full of a bunch of bugs. Also, though, if I was in charge of Microsoft, I'd make a new Windows that is just not backward compatible with a lot of things. Like, at a certain point, it probably would just run a virtual machine running Windows 10 for all old code, and all new code potentially should be written in like Rust instead of other programming languages, and in a memory safe language like Rust, and should run on completely new API and more slimmed down numbers of API access calls. Just start over from scratch. Microsoft has changed so much already that they are nothing. Like Windows 11 is just nothing compared to Windows 95 at this point. It doesn't feel anything like it. It may still run the same programs. And if I was in charge of Microsoft, I would definitely have to kick people to the curb. So many businesses are running programs that were designed for Windows 3.1 or Windows 95, and all of those just need to be kicked to the curb, and that's basically what Apple did. Apple just said, you know what, we're getting rid of all of any support for 32-bit programming. Everything is going to have to update, and yeah, Microsoft probably should do the same thing anyway. Perhaps you have a split product, you have a Windows product that is extremely expensive, and then you have a new operating system not called Windows from Microsoft that only runs newer things. Although inherently, if Microsoft did make a new operating system, I don't know if there's a lot of people that would bother to move their gaming rigs to that operating system versus just running Linux like Chimera OS. If you're going to lose a massive back catalog of old games to go to a new version of Windows, most gamers probably are not willing to do that. So Microsoft really is damned if they do and damned if they don't. But at the very least, I think if their source code has been leaked, this gives them a good excuse to rewrite a lot of source code and optimize things. Kick a lot of drivers out, in particular, that cause problems. I saw that YouTube's own YouTube channel was putting out a special video about MatPat, game theory, creator of game theory, retiring, and he announced his retiring. He's, I believe, retiring like tomorrow is his last day, and then he's handing over the channel to somebody else. They fully ignore some people who have criticized him in the past couple of years, and some of his dumb game theories being not some people have criticized some of those. I say dumb because most of his videos are kind of dumb. They don't really have a connection to anything informative or critical as far as what he's talking about. Like, some of his theory things are interesting, but when you have like a video that should you eat Pokemon, could you eat Pokemon, are they eating Pokemon in the Pokemon games, like that's just like a high thought basically. But I found it kind of irritating to see that YouTube was taking a special moment to celebrate somebody who's not even going to make content on YouTube anymore, instead of just staying silent and choosing a winner again, which is what YouTube is notorious for doing. It's a little less irritating if PAX wants to celebrate him and highlight that he is going to be on stage doing a presentation, because that's PAX's job, is to promote their own events, whereas YouTube's job, if it is anything, it would be to promote content creators that actually are going to make YouTube better and create more content. Yeah. If anything, it feels like YouTube is trying to celebrate this person claiming to retire when almost certainly he's not really going to live a life of retirement. He's almost certainly going to work in the backgrounds and just maybe work a little bit less, or try to be on TV in some other TV or movie acting. And yeah, he looks good enough that I could see him being hired as like teen celebrity, although he's probably in his 20s if not 30s. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com has an update here that says Keywords and Ubisoft is amending the Skull and Bones credits after omitting translators. It definitely feels unrewarding and demoting to not have my name in the credits, as a quote here. Inherently, this update means not that much. It took him a while from the 27th to the 7th of the next month to update, but almost, I think, all other talk, yeah, not almost, all other talk around Skull and Bones has long since died down. Nobody has anything positive or negative to say about the game. It is just pure apathy, which is the worst position to be in around any video game launch. Here we have Video Games Chronicle saying EA generative AI could make it 30% more effective and boost monetization by up to 20% over 5 years. So boost monetization means more microtransactions, more DLC. So 20% more microtransactions. That's what you have to look forward to. Plus 30% less bespoke, artistically created content. Yeah. So EA is basically telling gamers that they plan on getting worse. Even worse than they are now. Video Games Chronicles says they think the Yoshi studio is reportedly behind Princess Peach Showtime, which I think this highlights another just bad industry practice in an industry that is full of bad industry practices, in that you have Nintendo claiming to be the creator of Princess Peach Showtime when it's fairly obvious that Nintendo uses a lot of second-party developers to actually make their games, and I'm not sure Nintendo works on more than 1 or 2 games a year, and that would be Nintendo of Japan really working on 1 or 2 games. Good Feel recently celebrated its 18th anniversary by opening an office in Osaka, or expanded with an opening of an Osaka office in 2020. Studio has developed exclusively for Nintendo platforms since its formation. In terms of consoles, at least, in the past it included Wario Land Shake It, Kirby's Epic Yarn, and Yoshi's Woolly World. Which, if this data mine is to be believed, this data miner, Luigi Blood, is to be believed, then that probably means that Yoshi's Woolly World and Kirby's Epic Yarn type games are not coming back. Which, yeah, I guess that's probably believable. At least not coming back for a while. The IGDA has this Join the Game Accessibility Single Idea Group. What does SIG stand for? I would have thought it was whatever SIG stands for a hashtag GA Conference Europe, 2 days of talks and network exploring accessibility for disabled gamers, hosted by IGDA's Accessibility SIG London and online, 22nd and 23rd of April 24, which that's a mouthful. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about, although it is very ironic here. This screenshot here is from the game Hue that I just played before I started playing Hand of Fate 2. That was the second to most recent game I played. And it's quote-unquote accessibility colorblind mode, which is being highlighted here by putting a symbol on the color selection wheel and then putting a symbol in the exact center of any object that happens to be of that color. At best, that system is a color assistance mode and not really an accessibility mode for colorblind people, and it doesn't really work that well. So if you're going to go and listen to a speech and they're going to point at this as a great example of a colorblind mode, they are off the rails. They are not hitting the mark at all. The problem with this mode, and you can see it even in the game itself, is that there are laser projectors that shoot lasers of certain colors, and in at least one spot the laser projectors are above the screen and you cannot see the symbol if you're colorblind. You will struggle if you're colorblind to see the black symbol on the dark blue here. And depending on your type of color blindness, you would struggle to see some of these other symbols on the colors. And this red box here on the side is halfway off the screen. So if you can't see the difference between red and black in this example, then you can't see this red block at all. It is just not a good system. And very much like there should be one uniform, universal API for a character creation in systems like Steam and Xbox and PlayStation, and modern versions and takes on things like Nintendo Mii's. There should be a universal API for colorblind and accessibility issues. Some of those things would be very simple. That the first time you make an account on Xbox or on Steam, it just asks you, are you deaf? Do you want subtitles? Are you colorblind? If you're colorblind, it may ask you a few questions to create what you would call a lookup table, and then it would shift the colors in that lookup table into different ways, different presets, or allow you to customize your own lookup table, so that in the case if you're colorblind and you can't tell the difference between when I was playing Hue, you need instant recognition in some places, so I was having some small bit of trouble telling whether I was supposed to go to the dark purple here or the light purple here. With a lookup table, I could program it to change this dark purple or anything within a range of dark purple colors into something completely different, maybe green, or maybe yellow, or maybe just pure white. And with a lookup table, you can merge two colors if that's going to work for you more, or you can just separate two colors more often. You can lower the number of colors with a lookup table, so instead of having 65 billion colors, maybe you lower it down to just a 8 color palette, even something as low as that. But lookup tables are kind of industry standard. You use them in things like open broadcast software for certain plugins. So, and you definitely would use them in Photoshop. So that is the real way that you would address color blindness, at the very least. Not adding symbols, which, by the way, the symbols mean nothing in the game. They almost certainly were just pre-made symbols that they purchased. So, yeah, we continuously, I don't want to harp just on Hue, because this is a continuous problem that we're still seeing in the industry, is that you have a lot of people who want to make their games accessible and are just doing an incredibly crappy job in making their games accessible. They don't know what they're doing. They're offering things that are unnecessary, such as people using sign language in the corner when the game already has subtitles. There is nobody that would understand sign language, or far too few people that would understand sign language and not be able to read subtitles, which would say the exact same thing. And yet there was one game that implemented that and was patting itself on the back for that. And that may get us into another story, in that I suspect there are companies out there that straight up are being hired as consultants that are giving poor advice for accessibility. And that leads into, let me see if I can bring it up here, a story I've been hearing from a much more right-wing YouTube streamer, where there is a company called, I believe, Sweet Baby Inc., that is a consultant company. Let's see. Here we go. Let me bring up this page. I should have brought this up in general. So, my understanding, getting most of my information here from a more right-leaning YouTuber, so take it maybe with a bit more grain of salt, is that there's this curator who has a massive number of followers on Steam, Sweet Baby Inc. Detected, that is pointing out games that Sweet Baby Inc. from their own website have said that they've consulted on. And Sweet Baby Inc., the company, not this curator, is unhappy and calling this a potential harassment campaign, that somebody dare have the gumption to have a group that would highlight certain games made with the consultation of a single company, which inherently this would just inform people overall. So of the games here, you can see that Sweet Baby Inc. tends to have more left-leaning liberal influence, one would assume. But I don't think I'd inherently agree with just their reviews here, in that I think everything here is going to be not recommended. They're telling you specifically where these games are being recommended. This Tales of Kazurna Zau looks interesting to me. Neo Cab is rated very positively and on my wish list. This game's not out yet. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is mostly positive and on my wish list. Afterlove EP, I probably passed on it just because it was a rhythm. It says it's a rhythm game. It looks like a visual novel. I will agree, mixed reviewed Gotham Knights. South of Midnight is not even out yet, so not recommending a game just because that isn't out seems kind of unfair for your usual creator, but you have to know what you're getting here with this curator. This is effectively the closest we've seen in video games of people leaning to one political side and trying to create a boycott of companies. Like, what is it, Bud Light was one of them that was boycotted. Kingdom 80s barely has come out and it's mostly positive. Shadow Gambit is overwhelmingly positive. Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance is mixed. Hyperlate Breaker is an early access. Let's look at that one. Breeze in the Clouds I don't think is out yet. Look at that one too. Goodbye Volcano High is very positive. Usual Chain I don't believe is out yet. Battle Shapers is very positive. And Sable is very positive and on my wish list. Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. So most of this I imagine is coming out specifically around Suicide Squad and Kill the Justice League, which arguably I haven't heard anybody really complain about any more SJWE type content in Suicide Squad. In fact, most of these games don't strike me as being incredibly SJWE. Yes, there might be a decent number of people who are SJWs who worked on these games, but this is very much going to be a curating list that is only going to work for a small number of people who kind of don't want to make decisions on themselves and look at individual games themselves. Like, there's a pretty wide difference here between Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Neon Cab and Gotham Knights. And so I would heavily suspect, though, compared to the last conversation, it isn't Sweet Baby Inc. directly that is making the accessibility consultation arguments. They seem to be mostly making just, equality, feminist type arguments, things that might very well just be cover your butt stuff, where you have a AAA game developer or publisher hiring them so they can just blame Sweet Baby Inc. if they get canceled for doing something offensive. Almost certainly many people would argue that a company like Sweet Baby Inc. is taking the game developers' money for no good reason and not providing a good enough service for that money, which is then increasing the price of some of these games and the price of development of some of these games. It is kind of crazy that there would be consultants out there to teach what should just be common sense to game developers, and a lot of times they're not teaching common sense, I suspect, but instead teaching things that game developers already believe and creating an echo chamber. If anything, there should be a company that is just the opposite of Sweet Baby Inc., that is going to push right-wing agenda, more right-leaning ideals, and then you would just hire both companies and have them fight it out with their recommendations, and then ignore both of them and do whatever you wanted to do in the first place. I guess from an artistic creation argument, you could certainly say these kinds of consultants probably shouldn't exist at all, and the artist and the original intent from the artist should just be left alone, and they should just throw it out there, and if people react negative to it, so be it. If people love it, so be it. But yeah, this is a story from a more right-wing YouTuber, which he claims not to be right-leaning, but when you're clickbaiting to the right-wing viewers in every single one of your video, you kind of fall into that category. It is also a story that is not being touched upon and mentioned by your more mainstream video game journalist site, because they have a heavy bias and tendency to be left-leaning and pro-censorship, to the point where they won't even touch the story or try to put their own editorial spin on the story, which is probably better, because if they did put their editorial spin on it, they would just call this Steam Curator page a harassment campaign, which is not realistic at all to describe a curator page as a harassment campaign. Sweet Baby Inc. is definitely trying to make themselves look like a victim here, when they should be a mature company that can handle a little bit of criticism. But yeah, that story I've seen going around. Yeah, looking at Hyper Light Breaker. That's one of their games. It looks very interesting, so I'll put it on the follow list. Breeze in the Clouds. It's not out yet, and it's already on my follow list. And then Usual Jane is not out yet, so I'll put it on the follow list. Right. Let's see, we have a guy on the YouTube chat called NDA Aspirant that said, "Hello, bro." Hello, sorry it took me so long to respond. It's a kind of unique name, NDA Aspirant. Yeah. Let me check this before we move on and see if any refurbed game Steam Decks are available with the Steam Summer Sale coming around. Nope. Really don't think those refurbs are ever going to be a thing. I definitely have moved some tabs around, but here we'll go through the games that I'll make YouTube shorts around. Unfortunately, my clips program didn't work, and I'm kind of at the point where I'm not sure why my clips macro isn't working after I made some changes. I've changed too many things and didn't really properly document what I changed. So I'm just kind of hoping it'll work now. Same way as I'm recording solo videos of playing Hand of Fate 2, I'm trying to get the check video macro to work, where it would launch the video after the recording is done remixing, and the timing on that seems to never want to work either, and I just don't know why it isn't working. What sale is this? Some kind of an exploration sale or some kind of exploration tab? What? I must have clicked on something like a tag for exploration to open that. Let's see. Now we're at the new games that came out on Steam, and we'll see if we can burn through these fairly quickly. I definitely need to get the clips to work. I do think that will be an advantage to make clips, even if it doesn't mean anything in the long run. And then chapters also should be working, but neither one of those were triggering. First person experience of a man with ever advancing dementia. I feel like I've seen a game similar to this where it was based on somebody having dementia. Maybe that's a prequel to that game. I would argue there's probably a high chance that we are not going to see any real success. Nah, I'm gonna say no to that one. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna see any real success around games that try to inspire people to be sympathetic to people in general, but particularly sympathetic to the baby boomer generation. I think while everybody may have some small amount of love and respect for their own parents if they happen to be baby boomers, or their own grandparents if they happen to be baby boomers or older, the overall general consensus in whispered conversations is just going to be a lot of hate for the baby boomer generation, some of which I think is fairly earned. Here we see Rethink 3.5, previously unreleased puzzle game rebuilt in Unreal Engine 5 in a peaceful futuristic setting. This features a variety of puzzles that utilize lasers and the behavior of light and its colors to create challenging problems. So I played Rethink 1, and the weirdness around Rethink is that there's a Rethink 2, but then there is also a Rethink Redux series. So he has like a dozen games. It's not Redux, it's called Rethink Evolved. So there's like a Rethink 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then there's a Rethink Lite also, and it's just like repackaging and reselling the games. And the weirdest part about that in particular is Rethink 1 has an old version of its game that in my opinion is way better. It's a little bit more difficult than the new version, but it is way better, much more varied in what you're doing, much more interesting to look at. So it feels like he just George Lucas'd the original version of Rethink after some fan feedback, and so now I'm in this weird position where I kind of need to buy Rethink Evolved to see how much of a difference Rethink Evolved is from Rethink before I consider whether I should be playing Rethink Evolved or Rethink not evolved versions. And then Rethink Lite just confuses the issue even more. There's a lot of these games though, but yep. Solve 50 different puzzles and use new gameplay mechanics and more player freedom to find creative ways to progress through the game's beautiful world. Yeah, So Rethink Evolved versus Rethink 1. Rethink Evolved is a sequel to the well-received puzzle game Rethink. Interesting. So, as far as the description goes, Rethink Evolved is Rethink 2. Okay. Then, why is there a Rethink Evolved 2? I guess that would be the sequel to the sequel. But then why is there a Rethink 3? Or 3.5 at this point? It is the worst name confusion I've ever seen around the game. Rethink Like is a puzzle game that is a spiritual successor to Rethink 2 and features a variety of puzzles so it's a spiritual successor to Rethink 2. But then why is there a Rethink 2? It's so crazy. So crazy. It's like they remake and George Lucas the game every time. These games aren't expensive per se when they're on sale here. 99 cents, $1.99. Some of these later games maybe are overpriced a little bit. I don't think you really should be spending $6.29 or $8.49 for a game. But yeah, I've never been more bemused by Rethink, by any other company, any other game than Rethink, and weirdly, what you would have expected to have happened is that I would have played the first game, spent 99 cents on it, thought it was just an extremely low effort kind of asset flippy garbage game, and then just dismissed it out of hand. And yet that's absolutely not what happened when I played the first game. Alright, moving on though. That is way too much conversation about Rethink. And Rethink perhaps is right on the edge of being a company that feels like it is just flooding Steam with games. It would be fairly unique if Valve came out and told them they need to have more variety in their games or take longer to release their games though, because the one thing they aren't doing is releasing multiple games in the same week, in the same day, which we see so many other asset flipper game people doing that. This is an odd animation style. You don't see this too often, so I'm going to give it a chance. Right then, that's absolute garbage in contrast. Yeah, I saw somebody was clicking the hearts in the chat on YouTube too. I'm not sure what that really does, and I can only really see those interactions if I happen to be directly looking at the chat, which is not really guaranteed to happen too much. We'll give this game Yoko a chance. This game looks like it might be a little bit too much dark screenshot syndrome, too dark backgrounds. Yeah, but I don't know if somebody in the live chat pushing the heart button or thumbs up button or anything like that as far as reactions is telling the YouTube algorithm anything at all as far as whether people are liking the video or whether it should suggest a video to more people. This sad feeling I have around YouTube in particular is it feels like if you just occasionally paid a click farmer and a bunch of bots to view your video while it's live, while it's airing live, or in the first 24 hours, that would trick the algorithm long enough to make it then present the video to more people to get legitimate views. And even if they retroactively take away all the negative reviews, the effect is still done. And probably should be a better system to prevent something like that from being done. But I also kind of wonder if that isn't a large percentage of successful YouTubers out there are cheating. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube is very much like the professional sports that we've heard about in many cases, where everybody's cheating, everybody's on steroids, everybody who's succeeding at any level. This is a prologue game. Right. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to promote prologue games. We'll promote the games when they actually come out. My last video in particular, last live stream, I think got like 1 view in 12 seconds of view time, so just pathetically low. I never know how much of that is just due to the time I stream or due to random circumstances. I'll give this a chance. Or just, I mean, I don't even know. Outlast Trials. Interesting. I would have thought this was available a long time ago, but this must have just come out of early access. I think this is mostly multiplayer focused, and I definitely think Outlast as a series probably has run the course. I don't think anybody's really playing or talking about Outlast much in the past couple years, but who knows, it could have a resurgence. I had hoped that this Mud Runner game would have gotten better reviews, but at this point, with 449 reviews, I might as well take it off the follow list. I do think there is room for a Mud Runner game out there at some point, instead of yet another racing game, but obviously that didn't do it. These are all games I'm pretty sure that are coming out at the same time. I didn't open up a bunch of follow list cleanup games, which is my concern that might be going on here. So my macro may have opened up a bunch of old follow list cleanup games. I'll give this a chance. Yeah. Inherently, I imagine I probably need much shorter videos. I just don't know how I would really do that. Particularly, I have no idea how to break these 2, 3 hour, 4 hour live streams into 10-minute videos. You lose a lot of context, certainly, when you're just scripting for a 10-minute video instead of trying to actually have a conversation about video game news. And yeah, I can do clips from a longer stream, and that's my attempt to make shorter videos. But even in the clips, I'm, by reading headlines and not really commenting on them, I'm leaving out context in favor of making piffy clips. Do I want to say yes to this Tetris with cats? No, I don't think so. Yeah. I wish there was something on YouTube where you could reward what seems like being genuine would be. Although I don't know if my content comes off as seeming like it's particularly genuine either. Like that may very well be extremely subjective. See, this looks like this is a horror game, and yet then you just have this character out of nowhere. I'm gonna give this a chance. First-person exploration game. Does it require VR? No, doesn't even support VR. Heavy Storm Prologue again. I'm not willing to promote Prologue games just because there's so many YouTube shorts I'm making. YouTube shorts are still succeeding fairly well for as little effort as I have to put into them. But this is weird. I want to see if there's a DNA episode 2 or 1 from this developer. Let's see. DNA episode 2 has 1 user review. I mean, episode 1 has 1 user review. Episode 2 has no user reviews. Episode 3 is out. All these games coming out incredibly close to each other, too. So with that, it definitely feels like it is flooding the marketplace, probably with what is very similar games, if not the exact same game over and over again. This is supposed to be an action RPG franchise, and yet there seems to be no interface at all to be shown. No health bars, no choice selectors. Here's some health bars, I guess, in that screenshot. But yeah, that does not look like quality. I guess the best advice I could ever tell anybody who wants to be on YouTube is you better be independently wealthy or in a very weird situation to do YouTube, and you better be willing to do it for probably over a decade without making any money at all, which is not the advice you'd get from anybody else. Other people would probably tell you to try it for a year then give up, which is about the same advice anyways. Hairdressing simulator, that's something I would like to see done well. Unfortunately, it's already mostly negative. It would be difficult, certainly, to have a hairdressing simulator game and have all the hair act and react correctly. And of course, there's the danger of a hairdressing game being given to a kid and then the kid trying to cut their own hair, which nobody can cut their own hair good. It just will never work. In the same way that nobody can replace their own kidney. But yeah. Expect failure, I guess that's what I'm saying, as far as if you want to be a YouTube content creator. Same is true for any other content creator. It's even more work to be successful on Twitch. If you happen to be of the female persuasion or very, very good looking male presenting body, you can do OnlyFans for way easier work, or any other kinds of semi-porn or porn sites for, at least at the moment you can. Maybe eventually that will fall through also, but TikTok, things like that. And I'd say particularly if your plan is that you just want to be famous and then you can't answer the follow-up question, what for? What are you going to do that's unique that makes you famous? Don't even try. Because you don't have any passion there to actually create anything anybody wants to see. Nobody else wants to watch somebody who just wants to be famous. Or arguably, maybe there are some people that will get watched, but there's too many people already going down that path, so the competition is too high. And frankly, if you want to be famous and you have no other passion beyond that, you're gonna have to do something fairly illegal or fairly immoral to become famous at that point. Yeah, half of all famous people are famous for doing something immoral or illegal already. almost done. A lot of games. Little learning machines. I almost want to say yes to this, but this whole interface seems wrong for what looks like a programming simulation puzzle game. Yeah, I'm not really seeing any simulation programming elements up front and center, so I'm gonna say no to that. What you can do on YouTube still, and it's surprising that YouTube lets this happen, and I imagine they will eventually crack down on this, is you can use your own YouTube channel to be just a private collection of private videos as a video diary or something like that, and just like never publish any of the videos at all, and just have them uploaded for your own use. Eventually, I think YouTube will probably crack down on that and say things have to be at least public, or we're going to delete it after a year or two, or after a certain amount of storage space, or they're going to start trying to charge for storage space, which that would be crazy. You'd have to grandfather in almost everybody and continue to grandfather in almost everybody, or you're going to lose so many content creators. I can't even download the backups from my YouTube channel because there's too many glitches in their process. I guess I'm gonna take just a little bit of a break before we start going through the headlines. So I'm gonna pause the video and be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So yeah, we're on SteamDB here, trying to look and just keep appraised of what games people are playing. A lot of people still playing Helldivers. Helldivers still really not getting above a player cap of 458,000 as far as its all-time peak. It did say that at some point they were going to update the player cap to be 800,000, but it seems like it's very possibly the case that the interest has dwindled down to only, and I say that ironically, 363,000 in the last 24 hours. Yeah, seems like had on day one Helldivers, had they had twice as many servers and twice as many players playable, people would have played it for those first couple of days, but then by the first couple of weeks it probably would have also dropped down to about the same amount of time. But it did certainly set them off on a bad foot, and I still am hearing a lot of negativity around Helldivers, a lot of people standing up for Helldivers, playing the victim because people are angry and trolling and probably saying inappropriate things, making threats and saying rude comments. But yeah, they set themselves up for failure by not just having the servers good to go. They probably should have had a longer quote-unquote beta early access period. This might be the one argument in the future for multiplayer games to have long betas and early access periods, to just let a significant portion of players play the game, figure out if they like it or not, and figure out if they're going to come back and continue to play the game. Of course, all of that is in spite of itself, not stopping the game from being number 5 amongst some heavy hitters that I imagine there's been plenty of complaining around Counter-Strike 2 and Dota and PUBG and Apex Legends. Palworld is slowly going down to almost to the point where it's going to be below the top 10 in the next couple of weeks. Last Epoch, also rather popular but also having some problems. And effectively, people are kind of angry because each of these games are just not as polished as they should be at launch. Baldur's Gate, perhaps the only game I could mention in this list that there hasn't been any major complaints around. No, I imagine people are pretty happy with Monster Hunter World also, and any complaints around GTA 5 have probably long since gone away. Elden Ring is in the 16th position, Call of Duty is in the 17th position, and Crab Game, I guess, might be one of the games that is new out of nowhere in the 21st position. What it feels like it should be, here's Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in the 39th position. It really feels like that new games, here's Belletro in the 46th position, should be hitting the top 20, top 10 way more often, but a lot of people just play Call of Duty every day of their life, and people are still playing very old games like The Sims 4 or Terraria, or somewhat old games like Cyberpunk 2077, and that all just eats away at any possibility of there being a new game thing. Whereas if you were to compare these player base charts to like ticket sales of movies, it'd be a very, very different situation there. Sure, you might have a movie that's in theaters for 2-3 weeks, maybe even a full month, but then after that big successful movie, after that Spider-Man movie, after that Marvel movie, when there's lesser competition, you're going to have a new movie in the #1 ticket sales spot almost every other week, or every other couple of weeks. Although that would be an argument that would have been best made a few decades ago when ticket and Hollywood were in much better positions. Nowadays, it's not so much the case. I couldn't even tell you what movie is in theaters this week if you were going to go out and watch a movie. And we should be right in the middle of summer blockbusters. The closest movie I could even mention that I know has come out would be Madam Web, and that flopped hard. So, yeah, no clue what else is out. Competition as far as movie releases has gone incredibly low, while the budgets for movies have gone incredibly high. So here's my chart showing Apex Legends bouncing up and down, Helldivers 2 bouncing up and down, Arca Blade Point slowly, steadily creeping up, but Palworld was just a straight shot downward after its initial launch. You have Palworld here at 370,000 user 24-hour peak, then shooting way off the chart, and then several days later going downward, and downward. And inherently, Palworld is just not going to be fast enough, I think, with an update to bring back that significant number of players. Not really seeing anything else here, except for Last Epoch is the one game that's somewhat new and it's going a little up and down. And when I tried to make this chart, this is really what I was hoping to see more of, is that you'd have a new game like Last Epoch just appear out of nowhere and then be up and down, whereas in reality it has just been PUBG Battlegrounds and Apex Legends and Arca Blade Point, just the same games over and over again. The finals in playtest and the finals at some point did have a little bit of relevancy, but then the finals stopped being played completely. So I'm still really dubious on how useful this chart has been overall since I first did it on 9/16. It's been, I guess at that point, nearly 4 or 5 months, and it still needs tweaking, quite a lot of tweaking, and I just never have the extra time to work on it. Okay, so we're not at the Steam Summer Sale quite yet. We have instead a Capcom Publisher Sale, which we'll open that and look at that. And then we probably aren't even at this point playing a game of trying to find Helldivers or Pal World on the front page. I didn't know there was a Dungeons and Dragons online. Boy, does this look old though. I guess if you liked World of Warcraft but didn't want to play it with World of Warcraft anymore, that might be something similar. But yeah, there is this game here I want to talk about too. Beam Hill Platforming Heroes. Is that a bundle? Interesting. You don't see a lot of bundles on sale on this. Roll of the dice. Traveler's Rest. Alright, well, probably not going to do anything with Traveler's Rest. It does too much look like a Stardew Valley game for my taste. So you have a Roll of the Dice Tabletop Festival, which they are promoting, I guess, a lot of games that have Dungeons and Dragons dice rolling type mechanics, although dice rolling type mechanics exclusively may just be the case, because that doesn't inherently have to fall into Dungeons and Dragons. And they're promoting games that aren't even on sale. And then apparently they're going to do some live streams. Yeah, Steam definitely is trying to lean on game publishers and developers to do live streams to promote their games more, which does make some sense. Here we have a lot of games that are coming soon that have some kind of dice mechanic in them, I would assume. Let's see. Featured demos, getting special advertisement and promotion. And then controller support is interesting because, yeah, if I am going to play a dice game, I don't really see a reason to not be able to use a controllable. And then playable on Steam Deck seems to be another thing that's being promoted, which is also a very valid argument to make. Certainly is that there really is no reason, if it is a dice tabletop type game, that it wouldn't be playable on Steam Deck. That is something that Hand of Fate 2 kind of struggles with, I think, being an older game that would have been before Steam Deck came out. The cards are not depicted particularly well. The entire environment is a little too dark. Yeah, if I could really afford something, I probably should buy these Resident Evil games. It's been a long time since I played a new Resident Evil game, Village or 7. Steam Deck OLED, I would assume, would be advertised if it was on sale. And during the summer sale, it may not be on sale either, so it's a much easier decision not to buy a Steam Deck OLED model if it's in no way discounted during the summer sale. But then that also would bring about a question about when would you guess? When did this come to Steam? This is the second game I have seen on Steam. These all must have just been released, because that's a lot of games that I know I'd want to buy and would have wanted to own. Yeah, Steam Deck starting at $349. You should look at WWE 2K24 and see how people are receiving that. Too. This is probably one of the newest games to be released, and it's not getting much coverage. Probably doesn't really deserve that much coverage. Alright, well, so we see 29% mostly negative reviews here on WWE 2K24. Now, I'd heavily suspect that a lot of this is going to be around just them censoring out Brock Lesnar and Vince McMahon due to allegations around them. I imagine most wrestling fans don't give a damn about cancel culture and the idea of erasing Vince McMahon from videos and from the game. Yeah, I just don't think that's going to work. On the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised if that's really only about 30% of the audience hating on it, and the other 70% is just because it's really, really poor quality game, as these wrestling games tend not to be doing particularly well in the past 5 years or so. And in fairness, they never were great. What they should do is just hit pause on it. Make a WWE 2K25 that is 16-bit graphics and just say, this is the game we're going to make. We're not going to try and add a bunch of microtransactions. We're not going to add a bunch of 3D face scannings. We're just going to hit pause, reboot the whole series, and try and make something that is not as hyper-realistic and that feels more like a arcade game from the early 90s. And then that will at least give them time to think about things and how you would make a hyper-realistic game in the future. Here you can see there's microtransactions galore. So let's read the reviews and get an idea. Lost all my progress. I just can't do everything all over again. I don't even want to play anymore. It was fun until it deleted my save data. I can beat up Logan Paul as Mario. Money well spent. Even after the update 1.03 patch of the game, it is still crashing on my Steam PC. So this is performance issues. Performance issues. Can't access DLC I paid for. Servers are dumpster fire. EA progress got wiped when the game fully launched. Just continue to disappoint every year with a game that should be a slam dunk. Interesting. Not a single comment on Brock Lesnar or Vince McMahon being removed. Interesting because in particular, this is where Valve might have thrown them a bone and said the game was being review bombed for the fact that they have censored Brock Lesnar and Vince McMahon out of the game, but nope. It is 100% 2K just doing a terrible job. And there's something scary around that, certainly, in that 2K may potentially be one of the people who would buy Gearbox, and then Gearbox may very well be forced to work on wrestling games instead of making more Borderlands games. That would be a really dumb decision on 2K's part, but I wouldn't put it past them to do something like that. And Gearbox may be fairly not involved in the decision of whether or not they got sold to 2K. Well, I guess we can take that off the following list now. But yeah, when was this released? It says March 7th, 2024. So I know some Command & Conquer games have been in the past on Steam. But apparently EA, not to be confused with 2K, although the two games are fairly similar, has released a massive amount of old games here. I'm pretty sure I own some of these already. The Red Alert series and Tiberian Twilight, but don't own the first game, don't own Red Alert 2. So for my bundle purchase price here, that would be $5. Probably $5 worth spending. Entire Command and Conquer franchise is available on Steam. Now, in the case of Command and Conquer in particular, though, is this a game that I'd ever try and play all of the games through? No, probably not. I probably would never try to play them all at all. Unless I just stopped trying to make content and was just playing them on a Steam Deck, which maybe these games would work on a Steam Deck, maybe not. It depends really on just how good the resolution can get on that smaller screens. But yeah, these real-time strategy games take far too long to play in modern times to make any kind of commitment like that. So yeah, I guess the question we really should ask here is, what are the new releases that they have just put on Steam for March 7th? Dungeon Keeper Gold. Does that include Dungeon Keeper 2? Command and Conquer Red Alert 2. I'm just gonna add things to the wish list from here. Here is Dungeon Keeper 2. Yeah, I've kind of desperately wanted to play some of these games and talk about them, because they definitely are things that I remember. And things like SimCity 3000 may just be relevant enough, whereas I'm not sure Alpha Centauri Planetary Pack really is that relevant. But this game, Saboteur, I've talked about this game quite a bit, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. I've wanted to talk about that for a long time, and it just hasn't been available on Steam. The rest of these are not EA Play things. But then there's like Jedi Survivor, which is mixed, but I still think I would want to play that. And then the Dead Space remake. Yeah. So EA has just put out a lot of old games. So, yeah. So Dungeon Keeper Gold. Definitely would like to play that and talk about it. Now, my nostalgia for this game makes me remember the visuals way better than they actually are, and there definitely should be remakes and remasters of these games on Steam. Dungeon Keeper 2's graphics are slightly better, but still pretty much very, very old. The idea that it was released in 2024 is not the right way these should be labeled. There really should be something in parentheses here to tell you the real date that games were released. And then they ruined the Dungeon Keeper series, both in part because EA acquired Bullfrog Productions, as I imagine Bullfrog Productions wasn't selling well enough. But also, Dungeon Keeper 2 ended on a cutscene indicating that you were going to leave the dungeon, thus it wouldn't be a Dungeon Keeper game. Ironically, we have just never had another, this is a tough sell, mixed overall reviews. But yeah, I'm gonna just make an exception and put this on the wish list. Although there is just a possibility that the Star Wars Jedi Survivor series may come and go before I get around to it. But yeah, they've never managed to make another game that felt quite like Dungeon Keeper 2. In part because it definitely had this goth edgelord type comedy to it, that once you start getting into higher levels of graphics and more realistic graphics would have caused more controversy. Here you can see a dominatrix type lady. As soon as you start to put her in higher resolution graphics, that's going to be a little bit more adults only type games, and the actual gameplay itself I don't think has evolved at all for the 2 or 3 people who have tried to make Dungeon Keeper spiritual successors as a real-time strategy game where it is about base building. There really hasn't been a lot of desire around those types of games. Here you have a huge bundle of female platforming games, most of which are on my wish list, but that bundle at $90 is asking quite a lot. Let's look at the games that aren't on the wish list. Let's see. Evergate here. It's from 2020 and it's rated very positively, so I'll put that on the wish list. Frog Gun is rated very positively overall, so we'll put it on the wish list, although mixed more recently. Lunastella is overwhelmingly positive. This is highlighting a lot of games that I have missed, or in this case this was the surfing game, or one of them, that got put on my wish list potentially in 2022, and then I never returned to it to evaluate it any further. I'm gonna make YouTube shorts on these games though. Yeah, EA Classic Games save up to 60%. Has a lot of classic games. I want to talk about the Saboteur. Dungeons and Dragons Online from 2012. Free-to-play game with in-app purchases MMO. Well, I'd never actually play an MMO. And the other Capcom things on sale. Let's see if there's anything else here that catches my eye. There undoubtedly are some Capcom games here, but I think they are the same old Capcom games that already would have been on my wish list. This looks like this is not on my wish list, but Mega Man collections for Battle Network. Check out some of these. Plenty of Monster Hunter games. I definitely would have to pick and choose as far as what Monster Hunter games. And I thought one of these Devil May Cry games was taken down out of the blue, which would be kind of crazy to have it on sale. Not sure I'll ever get around to covering Dead Rising as a series. It's probably a series I should try, particularly at like $5. But yeah, Dead Rising games are kind of long time commitments. I'd prefer to play something like Okami first. Maybe at some point I'd get around to the Lost Planet series. Lost Planet 1 here, Lost Planet 3 here, Lost Planet 2 nowhere to be seen. Alright, so we'll wishlist that one. guess we would wishlist that. A lot of the games I'm considering on my wishlist though are games that I just think maybe would make good games to cover and not games I particularly am that interested in playing. That would be true with the Mega Man games in particular. This is DLC. It's just a soundtrack. So they were promoting a soundtrack there. Okay. So I guess I'm just gonna have to click on the Saboteur to get to the Saboteur. I thought I had already opened that. But maybe I did it on a different tab. So the thing I really liked about the Saboteur, and it's a shame they have not made a remake on it, is that it is effectively an Assassin's Creed game set in a somewhat modern time. You are in France during Nazi occupation, which I imagine was a real time. There may have been a black and white mode on it or some kind of black and white effect, but I don't think you spent much of the game in this black and white section, although maybe that was before you climb towers to reveal things. It is also somewhat Far Cry-esque in that you're climbing towers to reveal more elements or free more areas. It very noticeably had actual like cabaret girls with actual toplessness, well, animated 3D CGI cabaret girls and with 3D CGI toplessness in it, and that was sold as extra DLC, and then they took down the servers and took away that DLC and effectively censored the game. Although in fairness, that content, that extra content really didn't play any big role. The fact that it is rated here as infra-mature with nudity and sexual themes makes me suspect that the DLC content is now just integrated into the game and not being sold as DLC. It was sold as DLC through the Xbox 360 when I first played this game, and that may very well have just been a way of having the game on store shelves without Walmart being upset. Although there may very well have been some controversy around that back in the day. There really wouldn't be that much controversy. What I'd want to see here, in particular as far as curators, is if the content police curator had anything to say about it, but doesn't seem like content police as a curator has posted a review. It is certainly a game of its time, and so if they were going to remake it, it would make you just have to basically reboot it. But I think as a series, it definitely had more potential than it was given, and as a competitor to Assassin's Creed, it should have been given more of a chance. Whereas what happened is Assassin's Creed just managed to have all the success for that style of game with no clones and no competition at all, which eventually led to Ubisoft just getting stagnant in their designs and making alternating good and bad Assassin's Creed games made by their many different departments and internal development teams. And then eventually you just have games like Black Flag, which are very popular, but so far away from the original artistic concept of Assassin's Creed that it shouldn't have been called an Assassin's Creed game. And then you have Assassin's Creed Origins and Valhalla just turning it into an RPG game that is just completely different from what Assassin's Creed games were in the first place. Far Cry, I assume, just had more support and was more popular earlier. Otherwise, you might have seen the Saboteur series continue and Far Cry potentially dwindle out. And we still, at this point, probably should see something like that, where Far Cry dwindles out for a more interesting story around the Saboteur. I don't know if there's anything else particularly more to say about it, but it is definitely a game I would want to show off. My only real concern now with all these games on Steam coming from EA would be if the games would disappear or go away, and I just don't imagine that's really going to happen anytime soon. We've seen very little of that on Steam, where somebody lists a game and then delists it, or lists a game, then delists it, and then relists it. If anything, this is probably an indication that EA Play is going to be abandoned in favor of Steam by EA, or EA's own launcher at least is going to be abandoned by EA. Maybe EA Play as a service will be kept around. Alright, let's go through the headlines now. All the Video Games Chronicle headlines, fingers crossed this actually works to make clips. Probably won't, since I didn't change the coding as far as I remember. The funny thing is I could have changed the coding on Wednesday after the stream and just forgotten about it. That's very, very possible. Microsoft says Russia's state-backed hackers have accessed its source code and internal systems. Helldivers 2 was the UK's best-selling game in February. Warner is setting expectations for Hogwarts Legacy's free summer update. Details of the Epic Games Store's spring sale have leaked. Let's see. Do I care at all about the Epic Games Store's spring sale? No. But if it's happening March 14th and run for 2 weeks, then either the Steam summer sale is going to happen before March 14th and run for at least a week, or after the 2 weeks of the Epic Games Store sale. I mean, they could overlap, and Steam wouldn't really suffer from that at all. The Epic Games Store would suffer exclusively. But yeah, it's not inherently good for the gaming community if two major game stores, or one major game store and an aspiring competitor in the Epic Games Store, are having overlapping sales. Plenty of other third-party, very small key sellers, stores, and stores will also have overlapping sales that don't really matter. Fortnite Chapter 5 Season 2 Myths and Mortals have been detailed. Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama has passed away. Capcom has released a Dragon's Dogma 2 character creator tool. Brothers A Tale of Two Sons remake drops as low as 454p on the Xbox Series S in an analysis finds. Spider-Man 2's latest update accidentally unlocks debug menus which list potential DLC. Insomniac says a fix is coming and using it could corrupt your saves. Yeah, I'm sure that's what they're worried about. Ubisoft's Valiant Hearts sequel is out on consoles and PC today. Wasn't this a game that was originally for like Apple Arcade? No, it was a mobile game for Netflix on cell phones. No Steam link there. Maybe Komatsu will give me a Steam link. Spider-Man 2's New Game Plus update is now live. Epic Games Store's next free titles include Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is Japan's second biggest physical PS5 launch, behind Final Fantasy XVI. I'm a little surprised it isn't the first already, but I suspect it will be. Give it another week or two. Helldivers 2 Cutting Edge Warbound launches next week. Spider-Man 2 leads the BAFTA Game Awards in 2024 nominations list. See, this is funny because this article seems to contradict a different article I saw that said Baldur's Gate 3 had the most number of awards. 9 separate categories. Well, then how many did Baldur's Gate 3? Somebody got their information wrong here. Both things cannot be true. Unless I'm confusing something here. Well, I am confused, and I guess I'll have to leave it at that. EU says it's investigating why Apple terminated Epic's developer account. EA says Apex Legends will expand beyond the traditional Battle Royale universe this year. EA says generative AI could make it 30% more efficient and boost monetization by up 20% over 5 years. Yoshi Studios reportedly behind Princess Peach Showtime. Princess Peach Showtime demo is out now for the Nintendo Switch. Xbox partner preview featured brand new titles plus gameplay and release date reveals. Epic says it can't bring its product to iOS as Apple has terminated its developer account. Final Fantasy XIV's full release on Xbox is coming this month. I need to think about if I have a way of moving the tabs around there. It would probably be very complicated to do it, but if I had the oldest articles on the right side of the Firefox tabs and the newest articles on the left side, I wouldn't run into the occasional problem where I'm having an article that is being updated or contradicted by an older article. Of course, I could also curate the articles, but that takes actual work and time, and that's what I don't really have. Alright, let's go through the Gematsu articles now. Ikoni Islands, an Earthlock adventure for PS4 and 5 and Xbox One and Series, launches March 21st. Let's see, apparently it's already available on Steam, so let's see what game this is and if I recognize it. Okay. It's on my follow list. Feels like it's a bit of an adventure game. So I guess I'll go ahead and put it on the wish list, and I guess I'll make a YouTube short on it if it's coming to a new console. The action-adventure game Thorgal has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. That is not much of a screenshot. We could watch the trailer. Let's just skip around this trailer and see if we can get a general idea of what this is supposed to be. It looks interesting. But it is definitely more of a teaser than anything else. Let's see. What is this character? Let's see. Leather-bound female adventurer. And see, in these kind of leather-like clothing, this could be modern time clothing, or this could be set in the past or in an alternate universe. You just wouldn't know. Where this outfit screams past Viking-esque. So it does seem like it's some kind of Viking themed game. Moving on, the sci-fi fantasy Souls-like RPG The Night Wanderer has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Let's go through the screenshots but not try and watch a trailer. Yeah, it is frankly a little bit too much of a waste of time to watch trailers unless you absolutely have a good indication that the trailer is actually going to show you something. This is funny. We went from what looked like a Viking game to a completely different outfit. So it seems like it's part sci-fi, part Viking. That would be very much some Too Human vibes. Talk about another game I'd love to cover, but I think legally there's no way that game would ever be allowed to exist. Does not have a Steam link yet, though. Mote Solo, No Girlfriend Since Birth, is coming to the PS4 on March 28th. It's currently available for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. This is a, I think, live action video, kind of cinematic dating sim is what they're calling it. I think it's probably more of a Korean joke game than you would think. That being said, it is incredibly popular in the reviews, so I can go ahead and put that on the fall list. And I guess I make another YouTube short on it. A 2D fighting game, Hunter x Hunter Nin X Impact, has been confirmed for the PS5, Switch, and PC. Gummy is developing a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure mobile online game. Not a lot of details on that article. PlayStation Japan Play Goes On lineup video is available to watch. It's always interesting to watch the PlayStation Japan videos and promotion of games compared to the Western PlayStation advertisements and videos. They're very, very different. This video features Rise of the Ronin, Stellar Blade, Unicorn Overlord, and more. Stellar Blade in particular is a game I'm keeping an eye on, and it almost certainly won't be promoted in the same way or as much in the West as it is in the East. Tokyo Xanadu new project announced for console. So, not really sure what to take from that. There's probably a anime or manga called Tokyo Xanadu that I'm probably not familiar enough with to know what this is all about. Maybe there's just been a whole bunch of Tokyo Xanadu RPG games that have been released. I saw that they also were pushing back the newest remake release of Princess Maker 2, which it's not really a game that needed an announcement to be that tight that you would need to push back the release date. I mean, you're just remaking a pretty easy game at that point. You should have hit your release date. But in a lot of Japanese companies, it seems to be very cultural to just make an announcement, then make an announcement about it, the release date being pushed back as a way of advertising the game more, which seems silly to me. Fortress S is coming to the PS5 on March 28th. I don't think this is on PC, nor does it look particularly interesting. Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama dies at age 68. We can throw out the same criticism we have thrown out for like game developer on multiple occasions, where these companies that are putting out press releases and pictures of people just never seem to have a professional picture for the person, or an appropriate picture for the person if they happen to die. This isn't incredibly unprofessional, but yeah, if he was in a suit and tie, that might make some more sense. But yeah, obituaries are I can be a little bit more lenient on when somebody dies, particularly if somebody dies suddenly and unexpectedly. But yeah, if I was running a business, I would have an annual picture day. I would have everybody dress up and look nice and formal, and I would definitely say we need some somber pictures where you're not smiling, and then we can do a whole bunch of pictures with you smiling. And in most cases, smiling is fine, but in obituary, and maybe just a more somber, more professional look, getting at least a couple of those. And certainly if I was running a business, I would pay a photographer to make photos for everybody that worked for me, and make copies and prints for everybody that wanted them. I'll let them have their own copies of it to use for their own personal reasons, whether it's just their Christmas cards or whatever. Bring in the whole family even, who cares? I'd probably spend the entire day just having a picture day at any business I ran. It'd be good for morale, I imagine, except for the people that hate their picture getting taken. Dragon's Dogma 2 character creator and storage tool now available. Here we can see there's a fairly wide selection of furry anthropomorphic ladies, it looks like. Let's see what the reviews are. Yeah. So how do you get the character creator? I see in an article here. But it doesn't seem like it's DLC. So you have mostly positive reviews, 77% out of 100 for the character creator. And this just highlights in the screenshots what you can do. Particularly in the Unreal Engine, these sliders and these elements are fairly connected and similar to in every game from the Unreal that are made in the Unreal Engine. So like it is fairly crazy that there isn't just one character created to rule them all for every Unreal Engine game. And then that would be potentially a free app that Unreal could put on Steam, and then Unreal would have a unique presence as one of the top 10 most played, most popular apps on Steam. It would be a great way of self-promoting the Unreal Engine, although Capcom very well may not be using the Unreal Engine in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if that isn't the case. Now here's a good question. Should I make a YouTube short around a character creator that is really only going to be relevant for a brief amount of time? I'd say no to that. That's probably over promoting one game more than it needs to be promoted. And I'm going to kind of assume that I've already done a Dragon's Dogma YouTube short recently, so I'm not going to make another short around that either. Let's move on. Kunitsu Gama Path of the Goddess gameplay deep dive trailer and screenshots are available on Gamatsu. Let's see if we can do a little bit more. Yeah, one of the things I've probably been screwing up on in the past couple weeks is when I'm reading these headlines, I am kind of going into just automatic mode and reading the headlines without actively trying to look at the games myself and try and evaluate the games myself to some level. I kind of feel like I remember a game like this, and this must be that game. It just feels like they've maybe polished up the visuals a little bit more and as it gets closer to release. Princess Maker 2 Regeneration has been delayed to July 11th. Now this is an interesting choice as far as the screenshot that they've chosen for Princess Maker 2, because almost always in Princess Maker, since it's a daughter raising simulator, they show the daughter in her youth in forms, not in what would be probably an in-screen form at this point where she's fully grown up. But maybe that's a hint at a new emphasis. In particular, is that they are trying to, with Princess Maker Regeneration, overemphasize the parts of the game you see the least of, which would be her in her older forms. I mean, this is closer to preteen teenage forms, but yeah, you mostly kind of see her like that. And they've made, I guess, full-on new animations for every section and every activity to interact with in between the very static strategy RPG elements that you're mostly doing. And then notably they're showing you all the stats in the game that will get you different endings, so it would be less work to follow a walkthrough to get a certain ending. And they keep that looks like that's some better improvement than the last remake of Princess Maker 2, but they keep going back to Princess Maker 2 in particular. There's almost no interest in any of the other Princess Maker games before or after. And as a series, it's something that I guess just was never popular enough to get anybody else to really try and clone it. There's a couple of clone games I know of, but yeah, Princess Maker 2 definitely was a game of a time. More simplistic graphics that would have worked on a more simplistic old computer from several decades ago. And yeah, I guess it's probably fairly unrelatable to have a child raising simulator as a game in the first place. Even as a secondary gameplay mechanic, we don't see that really happen too much. I guess God of War reboot is about the closest thing you would have to that. That God of War is almost certainly way simpler than Princess Maker series, which is a strategy game series that's very much like a branching path visual novel series where you're going for different endings or just playing randomly to see what happens there. Amare Zone, the Explorer's Legacy remake, has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. I have no idea what this game is that it could be remade. When did this game originally get released? Came out in 1999. I have no idea what kind of game it even is. It almost feels like it's a point and click adventure. guess we need to watch the trailer just to see if we can figure out what kind of game it is. Based on the work of a character I don't know. Of a creator I don't know. Well, it looks very pretty, but it also kind of feels like it is a point-and-click adventure if you were going to make something like a point-and-click adventure game in modern times. Maybe that's the way point-and-click adventure games should go. It almost has a little bit of a Myst-like feel to it also, which that could be cool. Anyways, moving on. Duelist of Eden is now available. Let's see if we've got that on the follow list. Nope. We'll put it on the follow list. Hello. Yeah, I want to think about it a little bit more, even though it's already rated very positive and has over 30 reviews, which would mean I should really just put it on the wish list. I'm not 100% sold on these visuals. Marvel Spider-Man 2 New Game Plus update is now available. Rise of the Ronin Developer Diary Chapter 3 The Cause is available to read or view on Gamatsu. Outworld 2 has been announced for consoles and PC. It is a little frustrating to have entire series now, in the case of Outworld 2, of games I just don't know anything about, and I probably should know something about it. I'm just not playing as many games as I would like to, and I'm playing a ton of games, so I know most gamers out there are either not staying anywhere as connected to the vast number of games that are coming out, which is probably the case, or they're actively rejecting a lot more games that they would just never want to play, which is also very possible. Nine Dots Publishing and Ever Curious announced a post-apocalyptic survival game called Witherbloom for consoles and PC. I honestly don't know what I would do to try to make more footage or play more games, short of doing like cocaine or something, some kind of drug to keep me awake 24/7 and more productive. It wouldn't be healthy, whatever I would do, whether it would be 5-hour energy drink or drugs or just trying to skip sleep completely. Nine Dot Studios announced a grid-based roguelike game, Lost in Prayer, for PC. There must have been an event around Nine Dots Publishing. Yeah, and I guess the truth of the matter is that a lot of mainstream video game journalists that are covering a lot more games are doing it because they either have assistants or they're playing games only for a few hours before abandoning them, which is not how I want to play any game, really. If I'm abandoning a game before I see the credits, it's a failure of that game. It's got to be really, really bad. Vindictus Defying Fate public pre-alpha playtest set for March 13th to the 18th. Pixel Share adds a PS5 and Switch versions. Opening a lot of tabs today. Do I even want to bother to put this on the fault list? I don't think I do. Sunsoft and Ango announced a colony simulation tower defense game, Ark of Sharon, for PC. put this on the follow list. Although, still really may not be my type of game. RPG Maker With is coming to the West this fall for Switch in 2025 and for the PS5 and PS4, I guess at some point. I guess With has some kind of co-op abilities where you can share assets and unfinished projects to create games together, which at the end of the day you're still going to be creating RPG Maker games together. And this is just not the way you should learn to program. This is a Scratch-like visual programming language that will never let you create anything new or unique. And it's just glossing over the amount of struggle and effort you'd have to do to animate characters yourself, or to draw and 3D model the characters yourself, or to program any real part of the game. I just don't see a reason why RPG Maker should exist. It's just teaching false hope to people, making them think they can make games when without them having actually learned how to make games. I guess perhaps you correct bad speech with more speech instead of censorship. That would be the argument always for free speech advocates. So instead of saying we should get rid of RPG Maker, we should probably educate people who might use RPG Makers that there are other softwares and other ways to do things, and maybe it'll take more work, but you'll have an actual good product at that point. Although I imagine a lot of people make RPG Maker games just because they know it's going to be easy and don't care about the quality of their product. But yeah, in all fairness, there isn't some kind of plugin for Unreal Engine or Unity or even the open source Godot engine that would make it as simple as an RPG Maker game to make an RPG, if that's all you really want to do. And so there probably should just be a Godot engine plugin that would turn the game engine into a much more dumbed down, simplified experience where you could make RPGs fairly quickly and easily. Moving on, a fast-paced bullet hell roguelite game, Solar Raiders, has been announced for PC. We have a few more Gamatsu articles to cover today, and then GameDeveloper.com articles will go quickly, and then we'll be done with today's stream. Famitsu sales from 226 to 33 have been updated on Gamatsu. Let's see what this tells us. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth doing really well in the first spot for PS5, then old Nintendo Switch games taking everything up till the 7th spot. Goblin Slayer Another Adventure taking up the 7th spot as a new Nintendo Switch game, and Matsurakai no Ki Taimin Aiden coming up in the 9th spot. And it seems like nothing else. Nintendo Switch games till the 13th spot, then 2 PS5 games in 14 and 15, Nintendo Switch games between 17, 16 and 19, then 1 PS5 game. Then a mix of PS5 and 4 games at the very bottom here. Still heavily Nintendo Switch games. Barstella Abyss launching very poorly in the 28th spot this week. And at this point, I think it's not even worth mentioning hardware sales. Like Xbox Series S seemed to sell a little bit more this week than the Series X. That seems weird, but Otherwise, it is very much just a race between PlayStations combined and Switches combined, with Switches being way higher in the numbers overall than PlayStations. And I imagine there's a decent chance that the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 combined will just never catch up, because Nintendo will come out with its next console, and that very possibly will sell like hotcakes too. I don't think that there's a huge reason why people wouldn't buy Nintendo's next console. Nobody's going to boycott Nintendo that successfully. Yeah, moving on, I guess. Nexon's 30th anniversary teaser website has been launched. You can see a lot of characters being highlighted here, and I don't think I can name a single one of them. Let's see if we can go to their well, let's not go to the teaser website. The company is known for Dungeon and Fighter, Maple Story, Kart Rider, Mabingi franchise. Yeah, seems like has a lot of games that are not really relevant to me. Yep. There's movement on the website here. It's still at that, with the pictures changing and swapping. I really couldn't tell you about any of these games. And they are kind of doubling up. Like this one shifts away and then shifts back over here, and each of these triangles are really only 2 or 3 cycles. It's just all very, very dark. Yeah. This is probably a great example of not doing justice to any one game or promoting any one game. I imagine if you're going to show off games in a similar format, you probably should have 5 games at most, maybe push it to 6. Definitely shouldn't have what looks to me like 7, 10. Let's just assume this is another 10 and then another 10 here. Yeah, it looks like there's probably exactly 30 different frames here, probably only promoting about 10 games, but yeah, that's not the way to do it. Anyways, moving on. Saga Emerald Beyond Sugness trailer is available. I am almost certainly mispronouncing that. Sugness. I don't know how you pronounce that. That may be just a Japanese way of pronouncing sickness. Anyways, moving on. Princess Peach Showtime demo is now available. The Middle East mythology inspired side-scrolling action-adventure game, The Land of Magnates, has been announced for PC. That is quite a description. And it looks fairly weird. And I like weird. See, the thing that gets me though is like, this definitely feels like this is more modern time, and then this feels like you're just in a completely different magical environment. Same is true here. And then this feels less modern. So maybe there's some kind of time travel element to this. A 3D Metroidvania game, Abyss X Zero, has been announced for PC. lot of these articles are going to be older ones, but if the game's not on the fall list, I have to kind of assume. I haven't made a YouTube short on it yet, even though that's not 100% guaranteed. A fast-paced Metroidvania game, Echo Weaver, has been announced for PC. What makes it a Metroidvania? Particularly when Metroids have Mother Brain in them anyways. I guess maybe there's just more puzzling in it. Maybe that is the way to go, to differentiate your game and say, hey, this is going to have more logical elements to it. Seems like there's a time loop element to it. Interesting, in a Metroidvania with a time loop. That might work. It's worth a try, certainly. Kunitsu Gama Path of the Goddess launches in 2024. I've already opened this tab. Okay, and that's going to bring us to the GameDeveloper.com articles. I still have not fixed the banners back to the way they should be. Yeah, I keep forgetting to do that. It's just so low priority in my mind. Brainjar Games has netted $6.7 million in seed funding for its debut project. Studio is made up from alums from Tryon Worlds and Flying Wild Hog, amongst others. Inherently, I really don't want to hear anything about companies like this until they have at least a teaser around the game. Because as a gamer, I just can't really care about a company getting seed funding to make a game when I have no idea what they're making. For all I know, they're making some kind of mobile horse riding game that I couldn't possibly give a darn about. Apple kills Epic Games' European dev account ahead of the Fortnite iOS return. Baldur's Gate 3 dominates the BAFTA Game Awards 2024 nominations. See, so we have a direct contrast here. GameDeveloper.com says that Baldur's Gate 3 has gotten 10 awards, including Best Game and Artistic Achievement, whereas Video Game Chronicles said that it was Spider-Man 2 that got 8 awards, which I would heavily suspect the Video Game Awards, Video Games Chronicle, is inaccurate on that one and maybe was missing out on an update or some information there. But it certainly doesn't help when 2 out of my 3 mainstream video game sources are contradicting each other with contradictory information. It should just be very much basic news. No opinions needed here, whether you can count the number of awards that would have come out of a BAFTA press release or not. Anyways, moving on. EA CEO says 60% of development process could be impacted by generative AI. Update: keywords in Ubisoft are amending the Skull and Bones credits after omitting translators. Tales Noir developer Eggnut lays off its staff after halting operations. So, we almost went through an entire stream today without talking about anybody getting laid off or any other major economic thing. This is a weird quote. It was great to have you by our side. The world is on fire. Call your mom. Yeah. See, that almost sounds like that's an insult there to say call your mom, but I think they intend it more as, you know, the world is falling apart, call your mother and be friendly with your mother. I don't even know what the Tales Noir series is, though. I feel like I would have heard about it. An egg nut as a name of a company. And they have not directly quoted him, because the direct quote here is the game industry is effed. Call him. This is another example of a company though refusing to just shut down, and instead saying they're halting operations instead of just saying we're going out of business. Which more and more I do think there probably should be a law that if you're laying off more than 40% of your staff in a quarter, or say maybe laying off more than 50% of your staff in 2 quarters, or even 60% of your staff in 3 quarters. So, some kind of limitations there should just trigger an automatic shutdown of your company. Like, we really should punish companies that are run so poorly, and yet aren't run poorly enough to put the CEOs and the management out of business. And so they just lay off vast majorities or all of their staff, or all of the associate level staff, to leave potentially one person in charge still paying themselves. Alright, we have one more story and then we'll be done for today. Warner Brothers is shutting down Rooster Teeth after 21 years. They have shut down Rooster Teeth after 21 years. I did watch some people's reaction to this, and a lot of people have nostalgia for old Rooster Teeth content, but the vast majority of them seem to have long since lost interest in Rooster Teeth. Now, people were reacting and saying you better start downloading everything from Rooster Teeth and everything from Machinima in particular, because they're speculating, perhaps without a lot of evidence, that Machinima is going to be the next thing that Warner Brothers shuts down. And I could see some reasons for that. In particular, if Machinima's content is heavily reliant on other people's copyrights, I could see Warner Brothers not caring about that, or Warner Brothers just not caring about Machinima in the first place. The Red vs. Blue series of Rooster Teeth, if there is like a copyright issue there from using the Halo characters, that loses one of the two biggest things that Rooster Teeth ever did. I think Ruby may be its own IP content, and there may not be any real big copyright issues there. They're saying that the final season of Red vs. Blue will be the final output before the closure of the studio. Which, yeah, I guess take that as a small blessing. Alright, and that's going to be it for this show. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.